Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest today. We have Linda Hixon with us, and Linda is the author of the book Symbol of Progress. This is about Hopedale, and it focuses on, welcome Linda, what did you focus on in this? Was it Draper?
Oh, it's about the Draper Corporation.
Right.
When they started pulling the building down, we decided it was time to do a photographic history of the corporation.
Yeah, and this book, you can get it actually at the library in Hopedale, right? And how else can they get it?
It's for sale at the Little Red Shop Museum, which is on Hopedale Street in Hopedale, right next to the pond. It's also on Amazon, and then we sell at local fairs. I have a nonprofit, so all the proceeds that come from this book, the sale of this book, go to the nonprofit to make more books, because we're actually working on our next project.
So you are involved with the Hopedale Women's History Project.
Yes.
When did that start?
I started it probably somewhere around 2018, but we just became an official 501c3 this past fall, so 2021. I had to stop teaching. I was a teacher at Worcester State, and I had to stop, and I thought I need to do something.
Yeah.
And my projects always involve students and volunteers. We do group projects. And once one of the books started making money, I thought, I can't keep this. I need to roll this into the next project. So making a nonprofit was the way to do that.
This goes way, way back. That Draper building, anybody, if you're not from around the area, if you go through Hopkinton, there was this, Hopedale, huge manufacturer. What did they specialize in?
The Draper Corporation, which started around 1855, although they trace their history back to 1816, they created looms, textile machinery. It was not a mill, it was a foundry or a plant, you can call it anything but a mill. And they were the largest producer of cotton weaving looms and textile machinery in the world. Not in the state or the country, but in the world. They were also one of the largest employers in central Massachusetts. They had plants in Maine, in Vermont, in New Hampshire, New York State, South Carolina. They had different plants everywhere by their peak. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, they were huge, and that building was on over 50 acres and had acres and acres of floor space where they made the looms, and they employed.
Who's the founder?
Well, Ira Draper was the one who created the first patent, and that patent was for something called a temple. And a temple is something that keeps the fabric straight and taut and keeps the edges straight. And his temple was automatic, so it moved as the weaver wove. The weaver didn't have to loosen the temple and move it as they got more cloth on the loom. So that was a big deal. That was groundbreaking when he invented that.
Is there a picture of that in here?
No. I don't have a picture of the temple in there because it's mostly about the building and the people that worked there. Ira Draper never lived in Hopedale. He invented that in 1816, but his son, Ebenezer Draper, owned the patent, and he started a machine shop when he moved to Hopedale because he was an Aidan Ballou follower. Aidan Ballou, being the founder of Hopedale, started as a religious commune. And then George Draper came to town, George being Ebenezer's brother. And they basically worked together, and the company was originally Draper Brothers, and then became George Draper and Son, and then George Draper and Sons, as more of his sons joined the firm, because Ebenezer sold up his part of the firm. And George Draper was the one who took it huge. He was an inventor. And they were from a family of inventors, like their father, like Ira Draper. But they also created money off the invention of their workers. So their employees were really important. Our next project is actually on Draper workers, and we're gathering Draper worker stories right now to put in the next book, which will be out, I'm hoping, by Day in the Park in Hopedale in September.
This coming fall.
Yes, September.
That's why I'd wanted my friend. I don't know why people are so shy. Her father worked here. I thought, you really could help with Linda here. I don't know if they don't want to talk about it, or I don't know.
A lot of the fathers didn't talk about what they did. My grandfather worked there along with all 6 of his brothers.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And when he died when I was 14. He was 90, so there was a big spread in ages. And he never spoke to me about his time at Draper's. He'd long been retired by the time I was born. And a few years ago when my aunt passed, I got some of her things, and in it was a picture of my grandfather sitting at his shuttle-making bench.
Oh.
And they made shuttles because they made textile equipment. And I'm looking at this picture, and I didn't know who it was at first, and then I realized it looks like my dad. But my dad never worked at Draper's.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized it was my grandfather who looked like my
It
father.
was his fault, yeah.
So I didn't know he was a shuttle maker. I had no idea. So I didn't know that until he'd been dead for almost 50 years.
Oh, my God.
So it was quite a surprise to realize what he'd done, because he never spoke about it. I am talking, I'm going to be meeting with somebody who worked at Draper's when they were closing. There's not many left. It's been closed for over 40 years. So if you were working there, you're now at least in your 60s, if not much older. And I'm talking to families whose family members worked there and did share the stories. So we are gathering stories, and if people go on my website, they can see the email to get a hold of me, and I can gather their stories.
So they can feel free to reach you, Linda.
Yep.
How did they get a hold of you?
They get hold of me at hopedalewomen.org. We are a nonprofit, so we're a .org. I'm also on Facebook at Hopedale Women, and I have another Facebook page called Hopedale Local History.
She has got some wonderful pictures in
Oh,
there.
the pictures are fabulous.
Oh. I mean, long before I saw the Draper building, when I moved up here 2008, the Little Shop Museum, but I don't know, Paul, do you think there's anything that you could zero in on
There's
here?
some good-sized pictures in there.
These are, these are excellent pictures. What year was it founded?
Well, they started building the buildings in 1842.
Mm-hmm.
The Little Red Shop Museum supposedly goes back to about 1842. That's when they broke ground.
Mm-hmm.
The sign outside says 1841, but that sign is wrong.
Yeah.
We know that they were in there working. It was a machine shop, and they were in there working by the summer of 1843.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of their first buildings. It's not where it originally was. It's moved twice. That building has moved in Hopedale twice.
The one that they just tore down, that humongous...
No, not that building, the Little Red Shop Museum.
The Little Red Shop.
The one that's on the pond right
Yes,
now. It's
yeah.
a museum,
And
and
it
that
moved.
building has moved twice.
Where was it before?
It used to be pretty much where the big building was.
Yeah.
It was in there.
Yeah.
And some of those pictures in that book, you can see the catwalk going to the shop museum. It's in the captions. Then it was on the other side of the pond.
Mm-hmm.
There's an empty lot over across the bridge, Freedom Street,
yeah.
and it was over there. And then they moved it to the current location, which I believe is 12 Hopedale Street.
I see that bridge, Freedom Street.
Freedom Street,
Now,
yeah.
that doesn't look the same now.
The Draper building's gone, so nothing looks the same now.
There was a huge flood.
Yes.
What happened?
There was several huge floods, actually. 1938, you have a hurricane.
Yeah.
1955, they had 2 hurricanes, so there was a massive flood then. They had 2, about a month apart, and there was a massive flood. That's part of the Mill River, the Hopedale Pond, and it's a tributary of the Blackstone.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Mill River starts flooding, the Blackstone is going to flood, because that actually goes down into Woonsocket.
Yeah.
And in 1955, somebody didn't raise the thing to let the water out at
Yeah.
the dam
And that's
early
what
enough,
happened.
and it flooded, and then it flooded in Woonsocket. It was a mess.
It looks like it's flooding. You know, when they had the day in the park over at Hopedale in the fall, that picture looks like it was that water flooding was hitting over there. Am I right?
It may have gone that
Yeah.
far. Yeah, it may have. Yeah.
Did it destroy any of the buildings?
No, but they had a lot of water in the basement because the basement rooms actually held the patterns and stuff
Yeah.
for their looms.
Yeah.
And you can see pictures of the basement flooding.
Now, these houses, beautiful.
Yeah.
These housed some of the workers?
Yes, those houses were built by the Draper Corporation. A lot of them, not all of them, but there's a lot in town, the duplexes. And the Drapers hired, I think it was 5 different architects to design the houses.
Really?
They wanted the best houses. And it wasn't so much about the workers as it was about bringing the buyers to town to buy the looms for their mills and showing the buyers what a beautiful town Hopedale was. So the Drapers owned a huge amount of land in town, and they owned probably about 50% of the land in Hopedale before the company went out of business. So
these are beautiful. Now these,
yeah.
You mentioned those duplexes. Whenever I go down there, they look so well made.
No, they're beautiful.
They're beautiful.
I grew up in a Draper duplex.
You grew up in one of them?
I did. Yep.
How many bedrooms?
We had 3 bedrooms on the second floor,
Yeah.
and then there was a full bedroom up in the attic.
Yeah.
We had it as a playroom, and then later my parents moved up there as a bedroom.
Yeah.
So there was technically 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, and we moved there in 1962.
Yeah.
So think about that, 1962, 2 bathrooms?
That's a pretty big deal.
That was a big deal in the 60s.
Were they both full bathrooms? Or
No, one was a
half?
half bath, yep.
So I notice people, they're still probably, do they rent them out or people owning them now?
A lot of people own them. During the 80s, Draper started selling in the 1950s. My parents were the second owners. They bought in 1962. A lot of people, back then you had to buy the whole duplex.
And then you could rent the one next to you.
Exactly, that's what we did. We owned and we rented the next door.
Great way to make money.
It was.
It's a win-win. You're helping a family and you're
Yep.
winning too.
Yep.
We are talking with Linda Hixon, and she is the author of Symbol of Progress, and it's about the Draper Corporation. What a history over in Hopedale, Massachusetts. Do you have any other books coming up about the...
Yes, we have, like I said, the book on the Draper workers. That's for this coming fall. I try to do one a year. I'm hoping for 2023 to do a book on growing up in Draper worker housing. Because I grew up there, and I know a lot of people who grew up there or raised their families there or are living there now.
Yeah.
And would love to talk about their experience in Draper worker
How do you
housing.
get them to come out of their shell and come see you?
Oh, you'd be surprised how many people
They will.
are interested.
Okay.
But I'm always interested in hearing from people, people I don't know. So, and the interesting part, if you talk, I've been talking to a woman who worked for Draper's for 2 years after World War II. She's now in her 90s. She left Draper's to become a nun. And she grew up in Hopedale, and as far as she's concerned, it was the best childhood ever.
She loved it.
She loved it. She can't talk in more glowing terms about growing up in Hopedale.
It's a beautiful town. It really is.
Yeah.
What is that white, Linda, what is that white building kind of up on a hill? Is that housing? It's beautiful, big house. Would workers have been housed there, I wonder, at one time?
I'm trying to figure out which white building. There's
There's a beautiful church in the center of town.
Yes, that's the Unitarian Church.
Somewhere up behind it, there's this big house. Looks like apartments, maybe senior, I don't know.
There is an apartment house in Hopedale that was built by the Drapers called Hopedale House. It's still there. It's on Hopedale Street.
Big white?
It is white,
Okay,
yes,
big.
and it's big, yeah. But there's also mansions on Aiden Street, which is right near.
That's right.
And those were Draper mansions, or the Drapers, the Bancrofts, the Dutchers. They all had mansions on. Although technically, the Bancroft House is next to Bancroft Memorial Library. It's still there. It's a
And
beautiful
Dutcher
house.
Street still, that's the way I go into Hopedale.
Yep.
They've got, and those names are so familiar to me. I've seen doctors move from one place in Hopedale to another. I don't know why. It seems to be a great place to have, I would think, to have a practice there. So your family was where you were growing up, and your father was a draper.
No, my grandfather.
Grandpa.
My father never worked there.
He never did.
Nope.
So how about any of your friends? Did they have relatives?
Well, I graduated pretty much the year Draper was closing. I graduated from high school, so most of my friends never got the chance to work there, but most of their fathers or mothers worked at Draper's.
Oh.
My best friend who lived next to me on Dutcher Street, her dad worked for Draper's, and her mother had worked for Draper's too. I don't know if that's where the two of them met. It's possible. A lot of women met their husbands when they worked at Draper's.
Oh,
But we tend to think of Draper's as being a male bastion of workers, but a lot of women worked there.
Yeah.
They not only worked in the office, but they worked in some of the shop rooms too. And usually they were the ones that brought the things to the men they needed to put the textile equipment together, but they did work there. That started around World War I.
When did it close?
It closed officially in 1980.
1980.
Yeah. So it's been over 40 years.
My gosh, think of all the employees.
Yeah.
And they housed them. It reminds me of Whitensville.
Yes.
Where they had, where they were housing all the people in Whitensville. That's what the Drapers were doing
Yes.
for their employees. Did they have benefits, all kinds of things, do you think?
They did. There was something called the Mutual Benefit Society, but I think the workers may have started that. I've been going through the newspapers looking for Draper worker stories.
Right.
And if you read the newspapers prior to the Social Security Act being passed during the Depression, which was the 1930s, you'll see men working at Draper's into their 70s and 80s and occasionally into their 90s because there's no retirement benefits.
Yeah.
So if you don't keep working and you don't have a family to take care of you, you're in trouble if you have to stop. So, after the Social Security Act passed, men were able to retire in their 60s.
Oh.
But, Draper's, over time, started offering more benefits to their employees.
Right.
I don't think they were a bad company to work for. It depended on whether or not you were in management, or if you worked in the office, or if you were an immigrant worker. If you were an immigrant worker, you weren't treated particularly well.
Really?
You also weren't allowed to live in Hopedale.
Why?
They didn't want the immigrant workers living in Hopedale. They wanted them living in Milford. So they actually built Prospect Heights in Milford, which is right over the line.
I know, yeah.
Yep, right near the hospital.
Yeah.
They built that to house Portuguese and Armenian workers and some of the Irish and Italian workers. A lot of the workers lived in the plains in Milford, which is quite a distance. And if you couldn't afford the trolley fare, you had to walk to Draper's. I think that's probably about 2.5 miles.
That's a lot.
One way.
Especially in the cold of winter.
Or in the heat of summer, yeah.
What were some of the jobs like that the people had there? So the looms, I know that.
Yeah, there was a foundry. They had actually 2 foundries by the 1950s, and one of the largest foundries in New England was at Draper's.
Right.
That was for casting the metal because looms are made of cast iron.
Yeah.
So you have people making looms, casting metal to make looms. My grandfather was a shuttle maker, so they made shuttles. They had a bobbin plant. The bobbins go in the shuttle that has the thread on it to weave the cloth. The bobbins were made in New Hampshire at a plant called Beebe River. And I had a great uncle who worked at that plant.
Yeah.
So that was his job. I think it was my Uncle Wilbur. I didn't know him. He passed before I was born.
Yeah.
But like I said, my grandfather and all 6 of his brothers worked there.
Did they save any of those looms to have on display in town?
I know that there's one loom in the Little Red Shop Museum.
That's it, right?
Yeah, that's one of their looms. They had many different looms.
That's the loom, yeah, one of the looms.
By the way, I have to give a shout out to my son, my older son Tristan. He designed that cover. He's a graphic artist.
Great job, Tristan.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Is he the 29-year-old?
No, he's the 36-year-old. And the D on the top there is the Draper Diamond D. That was their logo, the Diamond D. And they had a Draper green. A lot of their looms were painted green. The green changed over the years, but there was a Draper green.
So 2 things. First of all, people who are very familiar with Draper and would like to share their story with Linda Hixon, and also how can they get your book?
The book is available at the Little Red Shop Museum. They have copies there. It's also available on Amazon. Plus, we do local fairs to sell the book. We're going to be at Celebrate Milford, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, which is, I believe, on May 14th. I actually wrote it down. May 14th. I'll be at the Little Red Shop Museum for the Ferry Walk, which is June 11th, selling the book. And then we should have, if everything goes good, it goes well, we should have the Draper Workers book done by the time of Day in the Park, which is in September.
Yeah.
In Hopedale, right on the Hopedale Town Park. It's a huge day.
Yeah.
And if the weather's good, it's a great day.
Linda, how do the other women who might be interested, the Hopedale Women's History Project, how can they get involved in that?
Well, what we do is we're transcribing handwritten records that the women in Hopedale left. Hopedale was founded in 1842. 1848, the women start a sewing circle. They want to start raising money. They're raising money at first to spread the word because they're what's called practical Christians. They made up their own religion, which I think is awesome. And then they start raising money for abolition. They're anti-slavery, like, to the ends of the earth. They don't believe in slavery. They believe that blacks are equal to whites. They believe that women are equal to men.
Sure.
They're voting in town 80 years before women get the right to vote. So we're transcribing these handwritten records, and I can't do it all myself because there's 150 years of them. And some of the handwriting is terrible, but some of it's great. So if people go to my website, hopedalewomen.org, they can find out how to contact me.
Sure.
And men transcribe too, but it's mostly women and students. It's great for students. They don't teach cursive writing in school anymore. So if you want to practice your cursive reading skills, it's a great way to practice.
This is fantastic. How long has the Hopedale Women's Project, History Project, been going on?
I started it around, I think it was 2018.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah,
That's not
about
that long
the time.
ago.
No, but I started, actually, I was doing a master's degree in history in 2014. And one of my professors said to me, "You're from Hopedale? Why aren't you doing Hopedale history?" And I thought, oh, God. But then I found the Sewing Circle record and ended up doing my thesis on the women of the Sewing Circle record. And it kind of went from there, because we thought we had one record. And then somebody contacted me from the Unitarian Church and said, "Oh, I just found more books in the basement. Do you want to see?" Those books go from 1881 to 1999. So that's, what, 140-ish years of books.
So they could be part of the historical project.
They are.
You're allowed to have them.
Yes.
The town will let you.
The books are in the church. We go there and I photograph them, and then the transcribing can be done via email.
Which church, the Protestant church or the Catholic church up there?
It's the Protestant
The big,
church,
beautiful-
the Unitarian church that's right
there in the center.
right across from Town Hall.
I've been in that beautiful church.
It's a beautiful church, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Aidan Ballew's church. His church was there, but they pulled that down, and the Draper sons put that church up in honor of George and Hannah Draper, George Draper being one of the founders of the Draper Company.
Milford Hospital, weren't they Drapers involved somehow?
They were.
What happened there?
Yeah.
What was that?
I believe, and I don't know a lot of history about Milford Hospital, but it was, I believe, one of the Draper grandsons. I think it was Bristow Draper who was the one who raised the money for that. But again, I do the history of the ordinary people as opposed to the history of the big Draper names. For me, it's about the workers. It's about the people who walked through that door every day at 9 a.m. and walked back out at 5.
Yeah.
You know, those are the people that interest me. I like the Draper family, but they don't interest me as much as the people that were
Was there a
working
union there, Linda?
There was, but not until later. 1913, the Italian workers, mostly Italian, but not all Italian workers, go out on strike. And it's one of the biggest strikes that ever happened in New England.
Yeah.
And a man actually died. He was shot by the police.
Why?
Because he was protesting, because he was on strike.
Yeah.
The Drapers, Eben Draper, who had been governor of Massachusetts, he vowed he'd spend $1 million to put that strike down. And he did. It took about 4 or 5 months. He put the strike down. He was running Drapers at the time. So Drapers wasn't the best place to work, particularly if you were an immigrant, if English was your second language. It wasn't a great place to work.
Wow. I never knew that. No, most of us didn't.
I know. And it's a hard thing to remember that Drapers, I mean, they put that strike down hard.
Yeah.
They put it down hard. They hired private police. They passed laws that these workers couldn't come and speak about the strike in town. I mean, they were hard.
How long did the union have their strike?
That strike lasted, I think, from March or April till about summer, so it was about 4 or 5 months.
Back then, I bet that seemed like an eternity.
Well, they're not getting paid.
No.
They're not getting
Did the
paid.
scabs they call
Oh
them-
yes,
they
oh
were-
yes. I think there was about 800 who were on strike, but at that time there was over 2,000 that worked there. So
In the long run, before they closed, how many workers did they have?
the peak was about 5,000
Yeah.
working in Hopedale. Now, at the time, there was only about 3,500 living in Hopedale, and that's everybody, men, women, and children. So you can see that they had workers from all around the area. A lot of people from Upton worked in Hopedale because when the hat shops would have lulls, because hats are fashionable and go in and out, the men would go and work at Draper's. It was an easy commute. There was a train that went right through here and went
There
right
is
to
now,
Draper's.
too. Did the what was the? We're going to wrap this up. But what was the average salary for the? Was it blue collar salary?
I don't know the average
Yeah.
salary. It really depended. One of the reasons the strike happened was because they were what was called piece workers,
Yeah.
which means that they were paid by the piece.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't keep up, if you were having a bad day, instead of being paid by the few pieces you made, if you didn't meet your minimum, you got paid nothing.
What?
Yeah.
You put in 8 hours for nothing?
Exactly.
That'd be the day.
And
I would never do that.
wasn't 8 hours back then. It was more like 9 hours or even 10 hours. So this is why they went on strike. Because if you were a piece worker,
It doesn't sounds like a lot of our dear blue collar workers were taken advantage of.
they were. They were.
Linda, before we close, one last time, how can they reach you?
They can reach me at hopedalewomen.org. I'm also on Facebook at Hopedale Women, and we have another page called Hopedale Local History where we share a lot of our information because Hopedale history is really important.
So will they have are you going to bring the copy of the book downstairs to for the dedicated local authors wall section?
I can do that.
Sure, because people love it because it's all local authors, and Draper was such a big part of this area.
It was huge. I mean, it was one of the largest employers in central Massachusetts.
Right.
People came up from New Bedford and Fall River to work at Draper's on the trolley.
Yeah.
That's how important Draper's was.
Do you miss teaching?
Oh, I miss it terribly.
What was your subject?
I was history. I taught
You're
US
shoe into this.
US 1 and US 2, but I loved teaching.
Thank you for being with us, Linda.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Jen.
You're welcome. We'll see you next time and be my guest.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.